Welcome back. Today's episode is something I talk about with almost every single person that I work with. And it's something I personally had to learn the hard way. Today, we're going to talk about doing less, not more, which is actually the most athletic thing that you can do after your career ends. Now, this can feel incredibly intuitive because everything sports taught us says go harder, do more, A to B, 100%. That's been our identity since we were kids. And I know how that can sound kind of coming from a former athlete, the perspective that this is something that we've always had to, kind of dive into being the best at everything that we did. And there's a reason, again, I keep reiterating this. There's a reason Fortune 500 companies want to hire former college athletes because we know how to focus, we know how to stay dedicated, we know how to push off gratification, and we also know how to not be micromanaged because so much of the process that got us to that level was us showing up for ourselves and doing things consistently that allowed us to reach the peak of our sport. Now, personally, for me, swimming is my background. And I also went into coaching college athletics after I finished. If you don't know anything about me, I coached college athletics for 9 years, five at the Division II level, four that was as a head coach. Sorry, 4 years at the Division I level, 3 years, which was as an associate head coach. And everything in that entire world from the time I was an athlete to the time that I was a coach was geared around always trying to do more. And maybe the last 2 to 3 years that I coached, did we really start to think more about truly recovering? And that's just for swimming. Every single other sport, usually it's always do more film, make sure you're lifting more, make sure you're doing more for recovery, devoting more of your time. And the reality is that just becomes so much of what we are and what we do every single day. And you're surrounded by just more your entire life from the time you were a kid. Even when you think about the idea of becoming a Division I athlete, you just strive to do the best you possibly can. And I wanted to swim for Ohio State. That was my goal. I mean, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I always thought about being a Buckeye would just be the coolest thing ever. And so in high school, I went from doing one workout a day as a summer league person to doing club team where I was doing two a days. And again, high school season where the high school required us to do a practice at least once a day. And I was trying to stay on the club team as well because the club team had a structure where you basically had to, if you wanted to be on the team in the spring, you had to make sure you were on the team all winter. And looking back, I think there's no way they can actually enforce that. They probably would have let me stay on the team, but I didn't know. I was a kid and there's all these people trying to push this rule on me. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to do morning practice. I'm going to do afternoon practice. I'm going to go to my club practice afterwards. Next thing you know, I'm training 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, and training Saturday and Sunday. So I'm doing no time off. And so my entire life was built around just being the best I could possibly be. So thinking about doing less now almost feels like it just makes no sense. It's not something that we actually should be doing. And I feel lazy for, having that mentality when in reality, that can be one of the best things for us, both for our long-term health, but also in every other area of our life as well. So when you're a college athlete, more is literally the answer to everything. It's always more film. It's always more reps. It's always more conditioning, more sacrifice, more time away from your family because the athletes who outworked everyone were the ones who made it. And that was the true environment that you were in. The ones that were willing to sacrifice the most and truly just be athletes, or I mean, student athletes is just such a loose term these days. But if they were willing to sacrifice other things, then they would kind of be the best. And that just becomes something that's hardwired in every single day. And it doesn't just disappear the second you stop competing. And that's one of the hardest things I think to learn is how does that life transfer over to what real life looks like? Because we lived in that athletic bubble for so long. And the gym kind of becomes a new practice. We're used to training 2 sessions a day, doing 2 hour sessions, killing ourselves to feel like that's what we're supposed to be doing. And that's our expectation of what it takes. Their mentality has always been just keep showing up, doing more, we were rewarded in college after training a 20-hour week, going in and doing more technique work on the weekends or staying after, coming in on Sundays. Looking back, none of those things actually benefited me, but they were things that taught me how to work really hard. And honestly, it's probably the reason we still have a business today because like if you're asking me in 2022 if we were going to like make it doing this, I didn't know. But I also knew I was not someone who's ever going to give up and I could push delayed gratification until later. And thank goodness we had a process that works really well and we built the team first and we built the structure first before we even had clients. So we knew it was something that could be successful. But it was a big gamble. I mean, I literally pulled my retirement to do it. And the only reason I could make that sacrifice and make that risk is because I trusted my work ethic and I trusted my ability to, regardless of the circumstance, be able to work through it. But that doesn't mean that that mentality is always the best thing for every single way. And that when you think about that in terms of actually working out, you get this initial burst and you think, I'm going to, do everything I can and be at my best. I'm going to lock in. I'm going to, make sure I'm meal prepping every meal. And then you kind of think about it like this world as an everyday person is not meant for that. And that more work doesn't always exist. It's not always the answer, especially if you think about it in context of enjoying your job. The average person will start their full time career when they're 22 years old and they will retire when they are 65. And when you think about that, that's 42 years, 43 years of constantly working. And if you're just grinding that entire time, that's the majority of your life. You end up looking back and hating so much of the way you spent your time because it was just working versus enjoying the social elements of what life has to offer, enjoying if you're someone that ties in your faith to what you do, enjoying the time with your family and loved ones. And the key point of all of this is that system that we had when we were athletes was literally built for us to be at our best, and everything was around that. Recovery was built in, sleep was prioritized, nutrition was guided for us. That mentality of always having more is something that is sustainable in that setting. And it teaches us that that's something that we should be able to maintain for the rest of our life because that's all we ever know. But everything was designed to support that life. And when you go to being a normal person, you're responsible for every meal. You're responsible for putting together your schedule. You make so many choices every single day about the way you're going to live. And there's all these other stressors. You have bills, you have groceries, you have to cook, you have to clean, you have to do laundry. You want to spend time with friends. You don't want to spend your entire weekend just catching up on everything. How in that world are you supposed to train 10 to 20 hours a week? It's just not possible. And you have to actually be able to accept, okay, this is what I thought worked then, but this isn't going to be the thing that will actually work for you now. Okay, a great question I always get asked because there is this kind of continuum of you just graduated, you think that life is something that you can maintain of training, 6 to 10 times a week, doing 10 to 20 hours of training. And there is that phase. You typically see people going into CrossFit. We see them doing marathons. We see them doing Ironmans. We see them, just dialing into this level where they're like, yeah, I'm just going to do what I did before and something else. And that is kind of an identity crisis. And that can be a whole nother subject that we can talk about. But what does it actually look like to know when it's no longer time for you to do that? And it's easy to say that like when you finish your last competition, then it's time to transition. But the reality is it's something that actually happens when former athletes try to train the way they're used to. They get burnt out really quickly. So what does it look like actually knowing it's time to stop that life? And first, I think there's some really easy cues. I think there's having a full-time job. I think there's having a family. I think there's having that structure around where you have to give so much to others, where you can think about yourself, but the time that you think you have to do that isn't what it used to be. And I say this all the time, but I could care less what you can do for 3 to 6 months. I care what you can do for the rest of your life and the shape that you can maintain for the rest of your life. And that's a big part of why we don't preach being super strict with diets. That's a big part why we don't preach being really strict with meal prepping. That's why we don't preach training 2 times a day. And that's why we don't also do 2-hour sessions because I can honestly say for me personally, if I had to do 2-hour training sessions, I have an 8-month-old. And not only does that require a lot of time, I want to spend time with her. I want to spend time with my wife. I want to be present with so much of my life that I can't devote that time to working out every single day. So I need something that's going to work regardless of what life looks like, whether it's now or 20 to 30 years from now. And that's what we focus on. What does that burnout actually look like? And it's not what you necessarily think is. You think, well, I'm not getting injured. I'm not necessarily breaking down. But it kind of just looks like actually stopping. Life gets busy. You miss a day or two, and then it becomes a week. And suddenly a month has gone by, and you feel so far behind, you don't even know where to start. And so you wait to a good starting point to do this all over again. I see this pattern constantly. We'll talk to a former athlete and like, well, I could do this for myself. I can lock in. But also they just finished telling me they've gone back and forth for a year, 2 years, 5 years, because the reality is, and I've said this before, life is not linear. Things are going to consistently pop up and you're going to consistently think that you have to go all in. Life's going to hit. You're going to start over. And I could list off 100 examples of clients that go through this exact same thing, but I'll speak about one specifically, and she was a former swimmer. She was someone that competed at a really high level. I'm not going to say what level she competed at because that's her privacy. Uh, she would go through these phases where she would wake up at 4:30 and she would go train from 5 to 7. She would like get ready for work in 10 to 15 minutes. She would go work all day and then she would go lift afterwards. And all the while, she's engaged. She's preparing to get married. They wanted to have kids and all of these things. And she saw that she was actually adding body fat and she was actually getting in worse shape over the course of this time. And two things come with that. And it wasn't like she was old and needed to stop all of this, but her current life, she was working 9 to 5. There's just no reality where that was going to be something that would allow her to rest, recover, and enjoy the rest of her life. And so much of it came down to like just actually being able to cut it back to something that she could maintain because she would get sick every 4 to 6 weeks. And she thought she just needed the right plan to keep her from getting sick, but she could train those hours. And the reality was it had to be dialed back to something she could do consistently. And her body was telling her every 4 to 6 weeks that it was time to stop. And so she was frustrated. She couldn't do what she used to do. And she just thought she had to find a way to be consistent with it. And the reason she couldn't stay consistent with it has nothing to do with her discipline. It has so much more to do with the fact that her life doesn't fit that now. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't not as dedicated as she was when she was an athlete. She just set an unsustainable standard based on what they used to be capable of doing in a completely different life that just doesn't require that same amount of effort to get the same amount of shape, which is a great thing. Like it's amazing that you don't have to devote that much time to being in shape. But that's also a mental shift as well, knowing that you don't have to do the same thing you used to. And that's perfectly acceptable. And also knowing it's time to close the chapter on that section of your life and actually focus on something that you can do now. And so burnout for former athletes isn't necessarily about doing too much in a single session. It's about setting a pace that doesn't match what your life can handle, and any little thing can disrupt. And if you want to equate it to one thing, I like to think about it in terms of a bridge. We know a bridge kind of gives a little bit when there's wind and when there's a storm because it was super structured, then it would be something that would just collapse under the right pressure. Instead, it has some give to it. And this is the same thing with your training. We want to make sure that regardless of what obstacle pops up, we know exactly how to handle it and how to structure your life so that way you can maintain it and not just get started again in 6 weeks once everything calms down. But how do you actually handle it through that transition so that way you are able to handle this and continue doing this for life? Okay, now here's where it gets interesting because the goal most former athletes say they want is consistency, but the way they're going about it is the exact thing that's preventing it. Think about it this way. A 45-minute workout you do 3 times a week for a year is worth so much more than two-hour workouts you do for 2 weeks and then you abandon it. The plan that you can maintain for a month is always going to lose to the plan that you can maintain for the rest of our lives. But our brain thinks, because of our athletic background, that a 30 to 45-minute workout is cheating. It feels like it's not enough. So we either go all out or we don't go about it at all. And this is one of those common things we see when we're programming for someone that's just starting or we're building a plan for them is they're like, okay, they see it like, are you sure that's enough? Are you sure that's like the right thing for me to be doing? And they have to put a lot of trust in us. And thankfully, because we're not a cheap program, they're invested in it. So like, okay, well, I have to try this. And also we build a relationship with them where, they know that they're working with a team that actually cares about them. And so they're willing to put their trust in us to do something they've never done before. Because most people that work with us have never done anything like what they're going to do with us. And that's a massive shift in itself. But that's also a really good thing because we're shifting their mind around what it actually takes to be healthy for the rest of their lives. And that trust is something that if it were to come through an AI app or a program where it's like someone got certified in a weekend, they're like trying to correct your squat form, but you've been squatting since you were like 5 years old because you were in sports, you're never going to have the faith and actually trust in that process. And so because we're able to build that trust, we're able to do something that is completely different, that is completely outside the realm of what you would think you need to do. And not only shift you to doing that, getting results from it, but making it something that you actually can enjoy and do for the rest of your life, which is the most important thing. And I get it. I mean, I get it is difficult because we were literally trained to think that way. And I had someone tell me once, and I'll never forget it. She said, if I can't do it right, I'd rather not do it at all. And this is someone that wanted to just like lose 20 pounds and feel at her best. And she was like, well, if I'm not going to dedicate it and get down to like 15% body fat, why would I even start? And I can hear like every single one of her coaches saying that to her. Like, you either commit and get it everything you have, or there's no point in doing it. And that mentality, when you carry it into a life where you have a full time job and you have a family and you have life and all these things getting in the way, there's no space for that. So we had to tell her, well, okay, you're going to go all in. Like, you're going to do this at the best way you can. But what all in looks like is completely different. It's all in around consistency. It's all in around what's going to work for you now. And when we told her that, she was resistant to it at first, but we were also like, hey, like, we haven't done this once. We haven't done this 100 times. Like, we've done this thousands of times. And so you don't have to worry about whether or not it's going to work. You just have to trust it and kind of walk the walk for a little bit. And then once you actually start to see it work, you'll start to build that trust and know it's going to be something that benefits her. And this is someone where if you were to see, like, I don't know if I will be able to do it in the video or not, but like, she sent us her weight graph that she has in like some app, and it's literally like the same or going up for like 3 years. And then she starts working with us, and we're 6 weeks in, and she's down 12 pounds. And we don't do anything aggressive. Like, it's something that's pretty sustainable. She's like, oh my gosh, like, what's the magic? There was no magic. It's just a million silver bullets that were actually just the right stuff for her to be doing, and not micro decisions that she had to think about, things that we were able to shift into being the right process for her. And because she put the faith in the process to know it's something that she can trust, she got away from what she thought it had to be, which all in at the level she wanted to do it never would have been sustainable in her life now. And so she may have lost the 20 pounds, but she would have put it back on versus thinking about doing something that she can actually maintain forever. And that's the whole point. If you are doing more than you're capable of doing, or you're dedicating too much time to it, you're not just destroying your progress long term. Any progress you actually do gain, you're going to have to find out what works in an entirely new phase of life when things change, because we know that life is constantly adjusting, constantly changing, and constantly something that is never going to look the same. And the most dangerous phrase a former athlete can say is like, I just need to get back on track, or be consistent with what you were doing. You actually have to do something that like works for your life right now. You can't return to a standard that was built in a system that had 20 people supporting it. Like, that track of life is gone. You don't have a head coach, you don't have assistant coaches, you don't have dietitians and athletic trainers and sports information and life skills and all of these departments that were literally there to support you being at your best. I think about entire athletic departments are built just around making sure that athletes can compete at their best. And then you graduate and you have none of that, and you think the same system's going to work. There's no shot. So it has to be something that's going to work for you both now and forever. And this can sound like I talk a lot about our clients or our process, but I don't care. If you don't want to work with us, fine. But the most important thing for you to learn from all of this is that you need something that you can do now, and something that you can do when life changes, say when you have kids, or when you lose your job, or when you have someone get sick, or you move across the country, that you can maintain regardless what life looks like. And then when you are in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, you can actually continually enjoy them and not to be sitting there in aches and pains and thinking you have to start over again. Next thing we're going to talk about is why doing less actually works. And it's such a funny thing, because we were always taught like, you have to find this new stimulus. And especially in swimming, we're looking for stimulus. Like, we're looking for things that we can do to find an extra edge and to grow that extra little bit. And if you look at swimming at the top level, they're breaking records left and right. And so let's talk about what actually works now. It's about being smart and knowing what's going to work for you now. The goal post career is no longer about performance. It's about what you can actually do sustainably. And those two things require completely different approaches. And you have to remember that success also looks completely different. If you were trying to podium at NCAAs or win a national championship, that's very different than you trying to look fit and confident in your 30s. It's no longer about a 40 time or a bench press or how fast you can, turn the third base, or how fast that you can, swim a 50 freestyle. It's about feeling good in your 40s, having energy for your kids, staying healthy for your entire life, and hopefully being around for grandkids and so much more that life has to offer that's not just about sports. So when we're working with former athletes, one of the things we do is we typically cut that volume down significantly to what they think. And at first, they are usually very hesitant. They'll say, like, this isn't enough. I'm not even tired. Like, this feels easy. Like, we talk about what happens 8 to 12 weeks later when they're still going and have never felt better, and they actually are consistent. when you dial back that volume and you think about like what's actually right for them now, we actually start to get that athlete mentality into it again because they start to realize that, oh, like I can actually do this entire workout and I can actually enjoy it. And so they start to push, like they kind of find that internal athlete, that internal motivation because the thing they're actually doing is something they actually can accomplish and they can maintain. And so we're able to kind of like naturally extract that versus it being something where they have to force themselves through the workout because we also want to find a new joy for it. Because so much of what they did when they were athletes was based around them having to do it versus doing it for themselves. And the funny thing is, your body doesn't actually change during the workout. Every athlete knows that. It always changes during the recovery. But when we have this massive stimulus, we never actually get the recovery. So when we're training twice a day, there's no chance we're going to recover from that when we have all of these other responsibilities. We can't go take a nap in the middle of the day. We can't go get a massage from the athletic trainer. We can't go to the dining hall and eat the perfect meal. So when you're training twice a day with a team, that recovery is literally built in. But when you're in your 30s with a job and kids, recovery has to be something that actually is just like an actual focus point. And part of that means the workout being less. And so less frequent, well recovered sessions teach just like daily beat downs every single time for long term progress. And if you can't move or you can't walk up the stairs because you're sore, like when you were an athlete, then there's no shot. It's something that you're actually going to be able to recover from. It's going to take you a month to feel good again versus doing something that you can just consistently do week on week on week. And that's something that I think a lot of people will say is a theory. And we're thankful to like have the results to be able to back up that experience. And also for myself, like that's literally what I do. I don't train longer than 40 minutes for any session. And I'm both in the best shape of my life, mid 30s. I'll be 36 this year. And I feel like I'm 25. I feel like I'm younger than I did when I coach. And maybe I can get it on here, but I'd love to show a picture of me. I know it's like in some of our ads, but there's a picture of me when I am 25 and I look like I'm 40. Like I look exhausted. I look worn down. I was training nonstop. I was actually double the body fat percentage I am today back then, which is crazy because I was training probably 3 times what I'm training right now. And here's the part that really surprises people. When you train less but recover more, you actually get stronger faster. And that adaptation piece of actually having something that you can maintain and you can actually build on and have those building blocks for is incredible. That's something that we always want. I had a client who she played Division 1 volleyball who came to me training 6 days a week and couldn't figure out why she wasn't seeing results. We dropped her to 4 days. She was frustrated. She was like, okay, well, like it's hard for me to accept that I can't train the way I used to. 90 days later, she was stronger than she was in college, which wasn't even the goal. There's just like a happy benefit of it. She was down I think it was 17 pounds that she lost. And I can double check that. So if that clip's in there, say if it says 17 pounds in the podcast, that's the right amount. She actually enjoyed the process and she knew what the next step was for her in her life in terms of actually maintaining that. Now, what does a sustainable like health and fitness actually look like? And this is probably the most common question that people have very little clarity around in themselves right now because when you put it into practice, and I don't want this to just be a concept. I want you to walk away with something that's actually actionable for you. So I'm going to try my best to put this into words. Sustainable for a former athlete isn't 3 walks a week and calling it fitness. It's building something that challenges you, fits your life, and that you can actually maintain for years. Something that helps you feel your best all the time. So that's usually 3 to 4 sessions a week, 30 to 45 minutes, structured but flexible, built around your life, not despite it. It's not something you have to overcome. And the word I use a lot is floor. What's the minimum you can do and still move forward? That's your floor, not your ceiling, but what's the minimum? So as long as we can achieve at least that every single week, then our odds of being able to do more and want to do more is even higher. So the idea that a 15-minute workout still counts, even showing up at 70%, is better than not showing up. The floor is what keeps the habit alive, even when life gets hard. When you go through a hard time in life, can you keep the floor? Because life will always get hard. And that's not an excuse. That's just being a grown adult with real responsibility. As an athlete, everything's focused around that. You have training blocks, you have your schedule built around it. A lot of schools, even slots get blocked out where you can't take certain majors or you have certain slots blocked out for practice, and everything revolved around training. And adult life, where training has to fit around everything else. And it's not that any either is better or worse. That serves its purpose in an elite environment, but our life is not an elite environment anymore. We're not trying to win national championships. We are trying to feel at our best. We're trying to feel as confident as we possibly can and also be around for our loved ones and show up as best we can for them. The former athletes I've seen get in the best shape of their life post athletics all have one thing in common. They stop trying to recreate what they used to do and start building something new that actually fits their life now. So here's what I want you to actually take from this today. If you're a former athlete and you're stuck in that all in, get burnout, and start over cycle, it's not because you lack discipline. It's because you're holding yourself to a standard that was built for a completely different life than what you have now. Doing what works for life now is actually the harder choice because you've always had that mentality of being at your best. It takes more discipline to hold back than it does to actually go all out now. To build the floor to something that you can maintain regardless of life, learn to stay consistent with that and let your body recover and enjoy what you're doing now. Trust that process even when it doesn't feel like enough. And I can promise you it's not going to look like something that you've done your entire life, but I can also promise you it's something that you are actually going to benefit from and be at your best for yourself, for your family, for your loved ones, and be around long into the future in a way you actually can feel confident in. As always, thank you for listening. If this hit home, please share it with someone else. That means so much to us, and I'll see you on the next episode.